Welcome to week 255. And Adam had to take a potty break. So that's too much information, but it's the truth. So he's coming back here pretty soon. And there he is. How wonderful. So 255, here's the first question. Is that a prime number? Without going to Google, is 255 a prime number?
No.
I wouldn't think it would be.
No.
But I don't know. I didn't check it.
It's divisible by 5, right? 551.
Oh, yeah.
times
So it
5.
wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but 5 is the number of grace. So we're going to need lots of grace today, especially when Ryan rolls in, because he's in a meeting. he's and hopefully with somebody that's paying him and paying Shumaker Advisors. But today is going to be has the makings. It has the promise of being even better than the thriller in Manila. But the good news is Chris and Ryan both work for the same place. So they have some core values that they must adhere to, even though they may have very diametrically opposed ideas towards tariffs and that sort of thing. And there's a reason I'm wearing purple today, besides I love Charlotte FC and its royalty and all that, because if you add blue and red together, you get purple. And I think we need some more purple in this country, quite frankly. So the one thing that I am going to say before I turn it over to Jack and Adam is yes, and Chris and I were talking about this earlier before we went on the air, which is why we were a couple minutes late, my fault. But we're way too polarized, man. I mean, it just like emotions run high on the dumbest things because we have these inherent beliefs that, the world's going to end if you win and I lose and vice versa. It's very scarcity mindset. And so I'm going to ask that everybody on here, especially when Ryan rolls in and we have the rumble, the respectful rumble, that you remain respectful and give grace. You can have your opinion, but don't go deep into the political rhetoric. Like, there's enough of that out there. Just go on to Twitter, go on to or X, go on to TikTok, which is a video cesspool now.
Gary's Facebook page. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Some of my pledge brothers, and one of my pledge brothers who doesn't go there is a U.S. senator, and he's Republican, Roger Marshall. So be nice to him, Chris. Come on, man. You're scratching your head. Be nice to him. He's a good dude. I tied his tie in college every Sunday because the dude could not tie his tie. And then he became an OBGYN, which is pretty funny. But anyway, respectful. But topic of the day is tariffs. There's also other stuff going on. And hey, we hear rumbles about the UK. There's a, framework, whatever. We'll see. But besides tariffs, if you got questions, if you have stuff on your mind as a business owner, as a business leader in the private sector, primarily, we don't deal with publicly traded stuff. Let us know. We want to help. So Adam, riff.
Yeah. The unriffing aside, I think, is it okay if I just start to ask the opening question?
Yeah, go for it.
So if you could hit Chris not only on tariffs, but also on, hey, the big, beautiful bill, kind of what actually is in that, to the extent that we know anything, or like what, because I think they're going to use the reconciliation process to try to get something passed. Like what does that actually mean? Like what does that actually mean in terms of like what can they do versus what can they not do based on mechanically how the House and the Senate plan to advance that ball down the field. And I think at least I firmly agree that, I generally would agree that this would seem to be your one shot on the goal. So, you
Yeah.
gotta set through that and you gotta take it. But what does that actually mean if you kind of hit that as the other topic that you touch on?
We were
So,
just talking about that right before we went on, weren't we, Chris?
yeah, and so thanks for, again, guys, hello to everybody. Good to see you guys again. Thank you for having me on here. I'm glad well, let me just say, Ryan is probably, I don't know, maybe he's just hiding in his car because he doesn't want to come in here and get on camera. I don't know. We'll find out what his deal is. But Ryan sits on this wall, so we're separated by this brick here by at least 100 years old. So, we're gonna have to, we'll probably have to get really pissed off at each other in order to knock this down when we get on our calls. So, that being said, look, there is a ton going on here. I know that we're going to be discussing tariffs, and obviously President Trump is speaking right now and agrees to a $10 billion deal with Boeing and all of this stuff with the UK. It looks like it, we're getting this in real time. But I did want to actually kind of open up very briefly and just touch on the 800-pound elephant in the room here in Washington, D.C. is reconciliation. Okay, tariffs are being played out here on, again, NBC, MSN or CNBC, Fox Business, everything else. And while it should be, you have a reconciliation process underway here in Congress, a very heated one, and it's a very one-sided debate amongst the Republican Party. So I would just say, as we watch this play out, we are learning things hour by hour. My Republican counterpart and I were just on an internal call with some folks from the health industry, laying down what was potentially in this, what's going to be described, what's going to be called the big beautiful bill now. I guess Speaker Johnson described it as that. So, look, it's ever changing. I think where you need to focus, and I think I touched on this very briefly, like we're looking at every committee in the House has been tapped with identifying money to pull out to make way for tax bills and or Iron Dome and or tax cuts. So I'm going to lead with one of the larger committees, and that's Energy and Commerce Committee, right? $880 billion. You've probably heard this a lot now. For those of you who are even most passive of political folks listening out there, the Energy and Commerce Committee needs to identify $880 billion worth of cuts from that committee. That has one of the largest jurisdictions of most committees on the House side, right? Health, transportation, energy, telecommunications, okay? A lot of those cuts are looking like they're going to come from Medicare, Medicaid, and in the health space in general. So the debate right now, and it's being reported today, since Democrats are probably going to be out on the sidelines, they're not a part of these negotiations at all. The fight is internally is on the moderates on the House side, Republican moderates. So the New York guys, think Lolota, Lawler, some of these other moderates, and then kind of the more extreme wing of the Republican Party in the House side, like the House Freedom Caucus folks, who want to slash, slash, and slash. Where right now you have the moderates who do hold some cards here, basically saying, listen, we want our SALT deductions that we're not budging until SALT is addressed. Obviously, that was put back in place back in the first Trump administration. That is a hot button issue. That's where a lot of these moderate New Yorkers ran on, saying we're going to get SALT back in and we're going to pull it. So SALT is a big deal for these moderate Republicans, especially the New York folks and the Northeast folks. So they're not really moving until they see some movement from leadership on this. That's where things stand right now with them. The healthcare space and in the Medicare cut space, which is going to be deep. Republicans are talking about we're going to address waste, fraud, and abuse in here. Well, how deep is that going to go? We'll find out soon, but that is making a lot of folks uncomfortable. And I would also point out that if and when this gets out of the House side, right? They just announced, House leadership just announced they're looking at May 12th, I believe, of next week to mark up these bills. Okay, so they're going to mark it up, then they're going to start to move them, and then they go over to the Senate side next. Okay, so you still have to get this over to the Senate. and there's issues between both the Senate and House. And don't forget a bird bath, which means that they have this, and the Senate side has the bird bath, which I explained last week. I'm happy to do it again, but you have to get through some of what the issues that the Senate wants, and you don't want to keep kicking these back and forth. So the House really has a lot of pressure to get this right the first time, and thinking about what the House is going to do and make them comfortable with. And again, I'll go back to the healthcare space because this is a sticking point. You have members like Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. You have Senator Susan Collins of Maine, and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who have said we're not comfortable with major cuts to Medicaid. And that's going to be a big problem, and that's what they've got to figure out here right now. So look, there is pressure up and down, and I'll let you go. I'll shut up right now, but they want to get this out before the Memorial Day recess. They have made it clear, House leadership has made it clear they will hold the line and keep these members here throughout the week until there is a vote.
Jack had some stats. I promise he can share them right after I ask this question because I'm just so selfish on Gary's birthday. So, Chris, just so our audience is aware, Medicare is old people. Medicaid is low income people. Like if you just think about like the general, two buckets, right? Medicaid, when they talked about the state expansion of Medicaid to low income people and receiving a subsidy from the federal government, that was the federal government saying, here you go, states, here's some more money to support lower income people with Medicaid, which is part of the reasons why North Carolina the state legislature agreed to expand it, was because, okay, finally we got some government money we can count on. So like, if the government were to cut that, then all of a sudden it changes the calculus that a lot of Republican-led state legislatures had in accepting the program. But that was just a statement. My question is like, can you even budget score something based on the presumption of being able to find waste, fraud, and abuse? Because like, what if you don't find any? Or what if you don't find enough? Like, how do you, like, if I'm saying, hey, great job, team, we're budget neutral, but it was based on the presumption of fraud and abuse that is like a speculation or a guess, like, what do you do with that? Is that even a thing?
So, look, scoring by the CBO is going to be a big deal. That's a great question. One that I think you should pose to Ryan, because his people are trying to figure just that out, right? I think that you have some moderate Republicans who are saying, I don't want to go deeper than 500 billion in cuts, at least for Medicaid in some of these health spaces. So I can tell you right now that it's hard to give you an answer, in my opinion, when we might have I can tick off some of the things that they're looking at, the committees are looking at in particular, but that's not necessarily mean it's going to be there tomorrow, or next week, right? So it's hard. And let me bring you another direction, but also kind of touches on the scoring piece. So President Trump wants to build the Iron Dome.
Golden Dome.
Golden Dome.
Call
Thank
Golden
you. Sorry.
Dome.
Thank you. The Golden Dome, a big, beautiful Golden Dome. Donald.
There's a big for gold.
Yes. Part of the pay-fors that they're looking for could potentially come from, and I won't go into this deep because it can, FCC Spectrum Auction Authority. So the FCC holds auctions for spectrum bands. The spectrum is finite. It's basically the lifeblood of wireless, and to the home spectrum allows us to go and Wi-Fi and use Wi-Fi and all of that good stuff. They would auction that off. That money then goes to the United States Treasury. Okay, in some cases it's used to pay for potentially E911 or for first responders, but also it goes back into the Treasury and pays down debt. Okay, what they're looking at in the Energy and Commerce Committee is re-upping Spectrum Auction Authority for the FCC to hold these auctions, and that money would then go as a pay for to cover some of this money that's going to go for Elon Musk's tax cuts and whatever else they're going to use, right? In the Golden Dome. But the question is then, how much does the CBO score the FCC spectrum auction authorities. So FCC spectrum auction authorities could score 80 billion, and then it could score another 10 billion if they add different bands to it, you know. But it comes down to the CBO, as well as, you know, what's the comfort level of the members diving in on certain issues to find these pay fors. So they're always looking, and Ryan can answer this better, trying to find pay fors for the 880 billion that they're about to cut, and or in some of these other committees.
Well, Ryan, it's good to see you here, Pally.
Good to see you guys. Sorry I was a little bit late.
That's all right. I know that they don't get those golf. You can't get that tee time at 4:30 in the morning, so I get it. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I don't play golf, but like, I wish I was outside doing something.
Yeah. No, we're thrilled that you could make it. Thank you. We have kind of been denying, by the way, we did get a comment from a Notre Dame alumni that they love golden domes. So I think that was funny. We have been denying Jack his ability to do Rain Man, kind of his cross between Rain Man and Cliff Clavin, with useless or possibly useful facts. So perhaps you could sprinkle in some dad jokes in the midst of your data that you want to spew before we get back into the ring with the Republican perspective and the Democratic perspective. And again, anybody that came on here late, we're going purple, man. We need some red mixed with blue equal purple, and keep the partisanship and like the attacks off. Like if you want those, go on to X, go on to TikTok and spew venom there. So anyway,
Wow. Way to go on lowering everyone's expectations. So that way I can say whatever I want. No one really cares. So,
yeah, the question is it fact or is it fiction?
well, okay, here's one for you. Fact or fiction? Which of these two statements is true? What I'm about to tell you, I spent hours last night researching. Or B, I went on ChatGPT this morning and asked it a few questions to get the statistics. So
B. Yeah, I'm going for B.
And Ryan, just you missed a little bit. We Chris was good about talking about reconciliation and some other things going on, even though the focus of today was on tariffs. So I will kind of bring us back to tariffs and go through some statistics that. Again, I labored on very long time last night trying to find. And these, again, subject to either Chris or Ryan saying, yeah, that's not quite right. This is what I found. And just overall, the United States aggressive tax measures, as it stated. So on China, 145% tariff on most Chinese imports, including fentanyl tariff and reciprocal tariffs. Canada and Mexico, 25% on all goods, with some exceptions. The European Union, 20% tariff on EU imports. Venezuela, 25% tariff on all goods. And then it goes into, and Chris had mentioned the UK and having some negotiations with them now to reduce tariffs. And it says particularly on automobile, steel sectors, agricultural, says tech services, but I think that's meant to be more tech companies. And then I found this interesting chart. Maybe I'll share it if I can get it back on my screen because I don't know where it went. But it was the retaliation as between China and the US and how it all started. And their starting point in this chart is back to February 1st, so shortly after the president takes office. New 10% tariff on Chinese imports. The retaliation was 15% on us. Then it went up to 20%. Then China counters. Then April 2nd, that the cumulative tariff goes up to 54% against China. China responds with 34% on us. Then a cumulative tariff on April 7th of 104% with China. They retaliate to 84%. And in some cases, when the 104% tariff takes and goes into place. April 9th was when we hit them with 145, And then they retaliate mid-April with 125% on us. And then you start talking about mid-April where there's some exclusions and discussions about exclusions and about negotiations and everything else. So at least that's what was presented and provided to me as far as what the current status or how we got to where we're at. I'm sure there's more to the story. And as we said, again, in asking people not to get a deep dive into political comments other than Chris and Ryan, who have our full permission to state their perspectives, their various perspectives, and but no one else is allowed to do that, essentially. So having said that, I don't know who wants to start with either. Go ahead, Gary.
The only thing I was going to say is Mr. Golden Domer, John, had, I thought, an interesting comment here. He says, Politico is reporting that President Trump is expected to sign an executive order next week to decrease drug costs by tying the amount the government pays for some medicines to lower prices abroad. What are your thoughts? This is really to you, Chris and Ryan. What are your thoughts on how this could save the U.S. government a lot of money? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Okay. Look, I saw that executive order might be signed next week. I mean, look, there's this will pick up the dust, so to speak, of a lobbying war in Washington. Look, the pharmaceutical companies are going to be opposed to it. A lot of other folks will be in support of it. I think that, look, this is about not paying more for, Medicare patients, I think. I'm not a healthcare expert, but, than more than countries like UK, the people in the UK or France or just in the EU generally pay for their medications. So, I mean, it could significantly decrease costs for the patients, I believe. But then what are the knock-on effects of that? Does that reduce R&D investment by pharmaceutical companies? Does that slow the pace of additional cures or treatments? So you have to look at this holistically. While it may reduce the cost of someone's diabetes medicine or heart medicine, or pick your poison, no pun intended. There are knock-on effects, and we have to consider all of those. Look, the U.S. is the world leader in pharmaceutical treatment development, whether it's cures or treatments. And I think we want to stay in that lane. But I also hear the other side of, medicines cost too much. It costs, I recently talked to, my parents, and my mother had to go on a treatment that it was, I think it was $900 was their cost for a 2-week treatment for medication. So look, I get both sides. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time determining kind of where I come down on this, but Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I know you don't want us to start off this way, but I thought Ryan captured it well. I was just talking about this in my call before. So this is MFN. This is most favored nation. So what basically this is. It's called MFN. And on Tuesday, I think President Trump announced this. I think it was at a press conference. Basically, it's going to come out in an executive order, and it relates, I think, more to Medicare. I thought it was on the Medicare side, but it's tied to lowering prices paid, in you see in other countries. Ryan is right. Pharma is apoplectic. Okay, they are like losing it. They are losing their minds over MFN. This is like a big fight for them and a big deal. We know some folks in the pharma space. This is, they have been heavily lobbying the White House on this and their people. Now, again, these discussions and what's happening right now at the White House, they're still being, I think, it's again important to note that individuals with the internal discussions, this proposal has not been finalized. So we could see some more specifics coming out and things could change. But as it relates to the pharmaceuticals, they are losing their minds. And Ryan is right. Maybe this impacts R&D, R&D and other spaces, and we'll see how it falls. It's sort of like, I don't know, maybe it could be like in the tariff space where you put these tariffs on and then it trickles down, right? So we have yet to see. We don't have the order in front of us yet. That's coming as early as next week. But there could be some really impact. It's going to be very impactful to the pharmaceutical industry for sure.
All right. Actually, I didn't pay for the fireworks or the thought of fireworks between you guys. I paid because I actually just wanted to see your perspectives. That's really what I want. And I think that's what the rest of us really want. If you want to go see spectacles, go watch reruns of Jerry Springer, but I think what we want to do is, go for it, bud.
Yeah. So can you cool if we switch back to the tariff theme for a minute?
Let's
Ryan?
do it.
Sure, let's go.
So, well, are you prepared? Just kidding.
I'll preface everything I say on tariffs is I'm not an economist, so probably what I say is worth what you paid for.
I'm asking less on that. It's more like the thing that it doesn't make any sense to me, so maybe you can make sense of it. But I've had clients that have come to me because, we have more of a right-leaning client base, neither here nor there, it just is. And they'll say something like, well, the income tax is a highly inefficient way to collect revenue for the government, just as a statement. So of course, this is a fabulous idea to collect tariffs. And then at the same time, say it's going to be great to create manufacturing jobs. And I'm like, well, but if the manufacturing job comes back here,
the tariffs,
I'm not importing it, the tariff goes down. Where do you think the revenue is going to come from? So like, how is the Republican side of the aisle like reconciling that circular logic? And I swear to God, Chris didn't give me that question.
Well, I hate to say I don't know if they've thought that far ahead.
No, I'm shocked the politician didn't think ahead.
I mean, look, I think that while income taxes may be a less efficient way of collecting that revenue, and then there's the tariffs. I mean, look, until you have the tariffs and then you have income tax, but until income tax would go away, you're paying double to a certain extent, or getting hit twice. So the likelihood that they'll get rid of the income tax, good luck. I wouldn't
bet on that horse.
Yeah. That's just not, I don't think, going to happen. So I think the calculus a lot behind these tariffs and the threats of tariffs, they're a negotiating tactic. They're a starting point to drive the economy in one direction, and that's to bring manufacturing, to bring jobs back to the United States, to reshore those opportunities. Now, also, I mean, look, there's conspiracy theories out there that these are out there to drive the market down so that interest rates will be lowered, so that the government can then refinance the trillions of dollars of debt that they have at lower rates. And I don't know, that could be part of the calculus, but at the end of the day, these are negotiating tactics to bring, to essentially put the win column back in the United States favor.
So then I guess the follow-up question, Ryan, is that other than Elon Musk kids, who's going to do the jobs? Meaning like in other words, like good idea, bring the jobs back. But in other words, like in theory, but at the same time, we continue to have near zero, like effectively zero unemployment, and we close the border, so we're not getting and we're not really looking to like boost legal migration. Who will do the work? Like who? Like hey, there's jobs. It's like, well, who?
Well, I also think
in other words, like I guess then that means the Amazon worker that quit the McDonald's, now is going to go work for the man. Maybe, I don't know. Like in other words, like what? Help with the circular logic on that one too.
Look, I've always thought that the unemployment number that we see the real number is always much higher. That's maybe that's me being a conspiracy theorist, but look, I think at the end of the day, over the past, since post World War II, we have seen this trend of ceding our making things moniker. We've our policies, our interaction, our bilateral agreements with other countries, China, we've allowed China, we've allowed India, we've allowed a lot of these other countries to become the world power of making things. We're the economic powerhouse, but we've become much more of a consumer-based economy rather than a production-based economy. After World War II, people came back here and built things. And I think that has slowly gone away. And as the world becomes more complex and more volatile, I think that the president is right in trying to bring back these manufacturing jobs. Look, I grew up in a manufacturing town in Defiance, Ohio. General Motors had their largest foundry that they owned and operated. They built, they poured engine blocks there. And we always kind of knew growing up the state of the larger economy as GM added or shed jobs at that facility, as well as other manufacturing facilities in Defiance. And look, if General Motors were to go away, Defiance would really be, it would be a depression-based town, I think. Look, going back to the main point, I think that while later this week, whether it's today or tomorrow or even into the weekend, Secretary of Dissent, USTR Jamie Greer, and others are going to be meeting with their Chinese counterparts in Switzerland to begin kind of the process of having these trade discussions. And there's nothing easy about them, about these discussions, but I think the president is right that they need to happen, because we're on the losing end of a lot of the, just look at our trade deficits with all these different countries. We're on the losing end. We need to better our position. Now, maybe it won't flip to where we are, in the positive, but we need to close that divide, I think. And again, not an economist, just my opinion.
What says Chris?
Well, Ryan brought up the autos and the impact it would have on his hometown of Defiance and in the communities around it. So let's talk about that. Stellantis, GM, and Ford are all talking about the tariff disruption to their bottom line and to their earnings. So autos have cut or pulled guidance due to these tariffs. That is a fact. And they're reconfiguring their North American auto networks. They are in their supply chains. You are seeing a downgrade in their earnings reports throughout. So again, I think it's undeniable. And I think you're going to hear a lot of Republicans saying, and even Ryan might would agree with me, that the uncertainty around this in a not a very well thought out plan here by this administration is causing disruption in supply chains. And you keep hearing about it. And I'm sure most of you who are listening in audience know, you're hearing about these potential supply chain disruptions hitting storefronts, hitting shelves in the coming weeks here, 3-4 weeks out potentially. So yeah, I think the folks of, unfortunately, of Defiance, Ohio are going to be impacted by that if they're traveling across the state lines to go to a GM factory or vice versa. And that's what you're getting here is a lot of this start-stop from this White House. And the uncertainty is really being a problem, and it's playing out in the polls as well.
So a couple things. I was in a manufacturing company in Walton Hills, Ohio. We made glass sandwiches called insulating glass units for the residential remodel world. So the Simonton windows and soft lights, etc., Polaris. And what was interesting is our biggest competitor was a multi-billion-dollar privately held company, and it's called Cardinal Glass. They floated their own glass. We didn't float our own, but it was amazing. And we flew up on our owner's plane, went there, and they had, even though they were much larger, we were about 40 million at the time, and they were a couple billion. They had fewer people in their plants because they had robots, and it was extremely efficient, and like aircraft hangar floors, air conditioned, and we had big ass fans, and it was just a completely different environment. And I thought, man, after going up and seeing these guys, and they're our direct competitor, but they weren't really intimidated by us. I thought, holy moly, it's hard to compete against that. Now, we did compete against them in various niches, but I think some of that, and I went to ChatGPT, and I'll get to Jamie's thing here, but I asked about the difference between like a GM, how many laborers are needed to create a GM product versus Tesla, and it couldn't give me a specific, because I heard some stat and it was like 4-to-1 on traditional, or even more than that, versus what's done on a Tesla. But they say estimated workforce per car is 30 to 40 per vehicle on GM, and Tesla is 10 to 15. And again, it goes to a lot of the robotics and that sort of thing. So I think that the workforce is going to look a little bit different. But I want to get to Jamie's point, and it says estimates for reshoring or even nearshoring manufacturing range from 12 plus months for simple assemblies to 48 months for complex and regulated manufacturing. Who's going to suffer through that transition? That's an important question.
Look, I think that there will be tough times. I don't know if we'll suffer through it, but I don't know. I mean, look, there's no easy answer. But we have to figure this out. We have to get regulations out of the way so people can reshore, nearshore, more easily. Look, I have a background in kind of the energy space. We need to reform our energy permitting process. We need to, fix NEPA, because a lot of the environmental studies and impact studies, things like that, all they do is generate more litigation. And that litigation slows down projects, slows down development, investment, and jobs. And let me just take a step out of that, just a bit. But, you talked about workforce. We need to invest in our workforce development. College costs are going through the roof. People are questioning whether a 4-year college degree is actually worth the cost, anymore. People are going into the building trades. People are, also becoming plumbers and electricians. And because they aren't generating are going into the type of debt that a lot of, the cost for a 4-year education often put people in, and they're still making great money, providing for their families and, being active members of their communities, all things that we want out of people. But if we're not bringing the type of jobs here, in a manufacturing sector, or, if we're not building things, those folks don't have a place to go. Look, I'm glad I'm not the president and have to figure all this out.
Adam.
So, Chris, if you could just kind of compare and contrast, or maybe find points of like intersection between the two of you guys. Generally, both parties have had platitudes to, we got to have a strong middle class. Like, I mean, going back to the first election I ever voted in was Clinton Dole. I'm really confident that was the messaging. And arguably nobody's done anything to make that better, regardless of who is in charge, much. So because income inequality has just continued to grow. So, Chris, if you were to think about like, okay, we agree on this, but maybe the tactic would have been different, or whatever. Like, what is it? What does a strong middle class actually even frickin' mean? And Ryan, maybe after he talks, you could say, yeah, that, either yes or kind of no. That's what we do agree to, because these policies seem to be centered on like strengthened middle class. Which everybody says, yeah, I'm for that. Like, how can I be against that until you're going to make me pay for it? Then I don't want to pay for it. I want Gary to pay for it.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to unpack, but I want to just point out yesterday in the Financial Services Committee, I think on the House side, Ryan, I think it was Financial Services, Congressman Mark Pocan, Democrat, asked Secretary of the Treasury Bessent, who pays for taxes, the tariffs. Bessent didn't answer the question. Okay, we know the answer. It's consumers. He couldn't answer the question. Really dodged it. I mean, it was kind of sad to see. Then you have contrast that with President Donald Trump, who's telling folks during a press conference, or one of his many, that your daughter or granddaughter is just going to probably be better fit to have 2 dolls as opposed to 30. So that seems to me like a bit of an acknowledgement that there is going to be some short-term pain, not just for us, the consumer, but hey, your granddaughter, guys, come Christmas time, maybe she's not going to get that doll. So, I mean, what is going on here? I don't know. Like, I mean, 1 minute this administration is touting the money that they're potentially bringing in from tariffs, and then the next minute they're running and hiding and ducking behind the fact that we don't know where the tariffs go or who it falls on. They won't answer it. So I think they've put themselves a bit of in a tough corner here. This announcement could be helpful. We'll see what the details are on it. But I think we all know, and most Americans do, by again looking at polls, that this is all going to fall back on them in their pocketbooks. So Ryan also raised schools and kids looking at alternatives from high school and going into college. That's all right. He's correct. That's all fair to point out. College tuition and all that has gone up. I think that's a different argument or a different discussion for a day. But what are we seeing here? If you watch Bloomberg or anybody, you're seeing that recession is back in the conversation again. 30%, 40%, as high as 50%. I've seen some of these numbers. Okay, so this is at a time, when inflation is not at 2% where the Fed wants it to be. In fact, Powell just yesterday talking about the health of the economy, saying that the labor market is still resilient and has shown strong strength. We still need to get inflation right, and there is a possibility that inflation increases if these deals aren't made. We're at day 27, I believe, of the 90-day since Liberation Day. So I think it's day 27. I could be a day or two off. Okay, we now have our potential first deal. We'll see what this looks like. But we still have they still have a long way to go. And again, those shipping containers aren't moving like they were. So get ready. And that's where we kind of are right now. Look, to your question as it relates to what is the messaging? The Democrats are in the minority because of their lack of messaging to the same people you just brought this up to. And I know that we talked about this at the last call. Democrats are lacking a message to the middle class, to the people of Defiance, to the people of Michigan, clearly. And they need to figure that out. I think these tariffs, in a way, and we'll see how they play out, because it's not going to just end this week. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see how reconciliation plays out if they can get it across the goal line here into the president's desk. We'll see how that plays out. But there was a time many, many moons ago where Defiance might have been a blue little dot in Ohio, because of where the Democratic Party was with unions, because of how they spoke to teachers, because of how they spoke to the middle class. That has somehow, over the past several years, decade, it's slipped away, and they've become advocates for other things. And I'm getting off target, but that's my question. The messaging has to change for the party right now. I think they're still trying to figure that out. And I'll shut up.
Chris brought up Mark Pocan's comments in the Financial Services Committee, and with all due respect to the congressman and to Chris, look, those make for great political talking points that run 30-second ads during a campaign season. But at the end of the day, look, we've had inflationary spending from both Republicans and Democrats. Both parties are responsible for this. Nobody could control themselves. It's like
We would all agree. Purple.
It's like a cracked out kid on too much sugar. They just
Not
had
good.
this disease. They just had this disease to spend. And look, I think it was Abraham Lincoln always said that the government is there to do for the people that which they cannot do for themselves. And we need to get back to that. It's not about providing yes, there should be social safety nets and all that, but it's gotten too far out of kilter. And we talk about, who's going to bear the brunt of this? Who's going to bear the cost? Who's going to bear the pain? And because of Wall Street and because of quarterly earnings, we often in America are tied to this view of quarterly perspectives. China, for ever, has had generational outlooks. They've had 100-year outlooks. We have gotten away from that. And I think that we need to take a much broader, much longer term perspective. So I don't know. I think that both parties are to blame for where we're at in spending right now. We need to, but nobody, anytime anybody wants to cut something, you're pushing grandma off a cliff in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like, come on. My kids, my grandkids, if what is it? If pain must come, let it come in my time. So my kids and my grandkids can be better off for it. Look, that's just one man's opinion, but we've got to get government spending under control, period.
Yeah, agreed. So Jack, I know you've been patiently waiting.
No, I've been very interested in all of this, and I appreciate the discussion back and forth. So there is a perspective out there in general public, but also the perspective of some people I know that look at, as I described, okay, we're going to punch and they're going to punch back, this back and forth, and how we got to 145%, that the original intent of this was to hit hard, to bring certain countries to the table, And, everybody's focusing on China, but I'm looking at a list where, they're inclusive of Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Indonesia, and then you get down to some of, the UK, Brazil, Australia, down at the bottom of the list as far as the percentages go on reciprocal tariffs. So what are your thoughts, each of you, on that being somewhat truthful in order to reduce the differential? And then a follow-up question would be is, let's say that actually happens, that the negotiation process continues over course of time, months, however long it takes, and we get to a number that each of you thinks that each side of the aisle would be okay with and moving on, even though some people would say, well, there was too much destruction to get to that point, and others would say, well, it's not enough, we haven't done enough, and we should continue onward. So is there a point of equilibrium? I shouldn't say that, a point where we can focus on other things because the numbers have been shifted enough so that there isn't a recession, there isn't all these negative economic impacts, or at least for a long period of time. That was a lot. So start with truth or not, could it be possible that this was a plan to get people to the negotiating table quickly?
Clearly, I would say, yeah, I think Pete Navarro's driving this. Pete is a hard-hitting, admin official in there, and I think they wanted to drive it. This is part of the deal, art of the deal. And yeah, they wanted to get it done quickly. I think the shock, though, to the system and to the markets was a major shock. Most of us felt it in our 401ks and other areas and beyond. So that's where we are. And they have now 60 odd days to get through the list, Jack, you just said, of all these countries. And we've got our first one here. We'll see. And they're going to start a discussion with China. We'll see where that goes. So, I think some of them will be low-hanging fruit potentially just because of the sheer size and scope. If there's barely any tariffs that they already slap on, like South Korea, my understanding, but China will be the big one. I think all eyes will be on that. That's impacting, obviously, our major drivers of the economy like Apple and beyond. And I think you need to look at chips as well and chipsets and what's coming out of companies like NVIDIA and ARM and all others. So, this is far from over at a time right now when we're starting to see some slowing in the economy. I think we can all agree that there is even consumer sentiment. There's some pullback. People are slowing. And there's still a lot more work to be done with the administration. So I'll leave it to Ryan after that.
Well, yes, to answer your question, yeah. Trump was elected to kick indoors. And this is, what people voted for. They voted for someone to come in and shake it up, and they're getting it. No one should be surprised by this. And look, it's all of these, most of these countries that we're trying to deal with on negotiating, better trade agreements. They're not our friends. I mean, they're not. China's not our friend. I would say even our friends maybe not always are our friends, especially when it comes to, speaking economically. So, because they want what's best for their country, we want what's best for our country, and there's nothing wrong with that. We just need to find a way through it. Sorry, did you have a follow-up question, Jack, or is
No, I just
did I miss something?
Do you think? Well, actually, it brings up another question. Do you think that the administration had thought through or thought how the impact, as Chris described? I mean, all of us, as he said, saw it in our 401ks. Or did they take the perspective, well, temporary pain for long-term gain? Because I've heard both. It's kind of like, well, they've been taken by surprise to the extent of it. They knew there would be some, and they kind of mapped it out, but that, all that has happened.
Real quick,
really wasn't
just
anticipated.
breaking news: the Trump has announced a trade deal with Britain.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um,
One down,
so-
many to go, right?
yeah, I don't know what the details of it are, but I just saw it come through on my screen.
Okay.
Don't make me interrupt.
No, that's fine. So I mean,
No,
do
that
you think
breaking
that
news
they
is
had
good.
anticipated? Yeah, do you think that they had anticipated the extent of, you know, the with stock markets and everything else?
I think they anticipated some of it, but you can never anticipate all of it.
Sure.
There are unintended consequences for a lot of these things. But I think Trump. I mean, look, Trump is a New York guy. He's he's a real estate guy. You know, he understands New York. He understands how markets react. So I think people underestimate the president and think that it's just all chaos. I think he's had 4 years in between his first and his second year term, or his second term, to think and plan and develop strategies. And you see that playing out now.
Yeah, I would agree. We got a comment in here, and I happen to agree, but so whether it's a purple comment or not, but his name is in purple, so that's good. Fed Chair Powell has shown himself to be duplicitous. Inexplicably lowered rates in September when jobs data was stronger and inflation was hotter. Now he refuses to lower rates when jobs data is weaker and inflation is cooled, as evidenced by lower CPI and PPI prints in March. This is from the same Fed chair who said inflation was transitory in 2022. The Fed is constantly asleep at the switch. It seems that way from me, you know, on the back end.
Well, Trump doesn't like him. I mean, I don't know. Well, you saw the reaction when 2 weeks ago when Donald Trump said that he wanted to can him a year early. The markets reacted negatively. So you can call him all the names you want, but the markets seem to have a lot of faith in Jerome Powell. And he's going to hold steady as he announced yesterday, whether you like it or not. I mean, Joe Biden could have made the same thing, that he was too slow to move interest rates 2 years ago. So I hear you. You're frustrated, but I don't know. Donald Trump didn't have anything nice to say to him after. I think he posted something. I forget what he called him, but you know, again, the markets seem to have faith in him. So any sort of movement or early push out of there, unless he resigns out of the blue, I think is going to stir up even more uncertainty and make a mess of the markets.
This is between Powell and Trump now. This has become a giant pissing match. Sorry if I. So this is not helping anyone. Powell's not going to leave out of spite. Is he asleep at the switch? Could be, could not be. I don't know. But the pissing match isn't going to do anybody any good. And you know, should there be a new Fed chair? Possibly. I mean, me personally, I think so. But look, I mean, at the end of the day, Chris is right in terms of the markets seem to have, or at least showing they have faith in him and his decision making. But you know,
Can I just make one point?
this is yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I know that commenter is upset with Jerome Powell and using pretty nasty words as Donald Trump would, but the Fed is supposedly supposed to be independent. And I recognize some of the Trump voters out there who don't like independence. You have to fall in line under Donald Trump, but the Fed chair is still independent. And that's what the Fed, and that's what the markets appreciate, potentially, if you think about it that way. Not just some sycophant who goes up there and speaks the word according to Donald Trump. And you've lost a lot of independent agencies now because some of these heads are just, again, sorry, sycophants.
Yeah, fun side
To your
fact, he was
point,
also
Chris,
appointed in the first Trump administration.
To Chris's point, I mean, yeah, we've lost some of this independence from, but I mean, look at the, you know, I think you've seen a lot of that sycophantry. I don't even know if that's a word. But
Sounds like it.
It is now.
I think it sounds like it.
you've seen a lot of that at the FCC. I mean, it's supposed to be an independent agency, but you know, you have Republicans and Democrats constantly going back and forth. And just look at the issue that, I mean, Chris knows it well, of net neutrality. That's become a political football between both Republicans and Democrats, and you get whatever parties, you know, in the White House, that their chairman that constantly does that president's bidding, to, for lack of a better term. So, I mean, now you're just starting to see it in other, quote, independent agencies.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, guys, we are at the bewitching hour. Adam's going to get very hangry here, and then like he's not going to be fun with me. So we got to go get some food in this guy's tummy. So, but thank you guys so much for joining us. This was really good. You guys lived up to the decorum that I expected. Wouldn't it be nice if we had such decorum in Congress? Oh my gosh.
I tell you what, every day I get to work with Chris, who is an amazing guy, you know, who I respect a ton, and the relationships that we have, you know, between myself, Chris, and our other partner, Jason, who's a Republican, and, you know, we'll likely be adding another Democrat to the team, hopefully soon. You know, you just got to have that respect for each other, and have the ability to have those conversations, to be to disagree without being disagreeable, to be cliche.
And having said that, Chris also demonstrated before you got here the brick wall that is between your two offices.
That
just in
separates
case.
us,
That's
Ryan.
right. That's right.
In
We
case
each have a
you're too
brick wall
angry.
in our office.
This brick is
Okay,
like,
can
how
you feel
old
like
is
you're
it? Like
beating
100
your
plus
head
years
against it
old.
several times?
Wait a minute.
That brick has stood the test of time in politics. It's about it's from the early 1800s. Our offices are in
Yeah.
they're in an old carriage house on Capitol Hill.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm sorry I was gonna try to come by and see you guys on Tuesday, so I'm sorry I missed that. Wasn't
That's
able to.
another
Do it
time.
next time. All right. Well, thank you
Guys,
guys
thank you
very
so much for taking time. Anybody that joined us late, this will be up on Shumaker's YouTube channel. It'll also be up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon. Thank you guys for what you do. Try to keep those professional politicians who are making $200,000 a year that are now worth $20 million honest. Like, how does that happen? I'd like to know if there's a legal and ethical way to do that, because I want some of that. So, I don't. All right, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much for what you do.
Thank you.
Have a good day. See you around.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
All right.